Hi, folks. I like to go through the comment sections every once in a while in my videos. I don't get that many comments, but if they're of interest, I like to share them with you guys sometimes. And these comments are all going to be off of BitChute. Haven't gotten anything on YouTube. The first video, there's going to be two videos. I'll share some comments. The first video is my reason for disobeying mandates. And I talked about these healthcare mandates and so forth, these shutdowns that occurred during the pandemic. I said that I didn't wear a mask. I didn't obey quarantine shutdown orders to stay in my house. Of course, I was going to work every day at that time. I didn't wear a mask in stores, those type of things. I didn't abide by those mandates. Well, here's a couple interesting comments. The first one says, this is by Nero Navro. And he says, disobeying mandates? Question mark. Let me move this over just a little bit. There we go. Disobeying mandates? By definition, mandates must be consented to volunteer-like. You don't disobey a mandate, you simply claim your rights to not consent. Disobey implies you broke a law, which a mandate is not. So what he's saying is we have certain inherent rights, and these mandates break those inherent rights. And if you're simply operating within your inherent rights, you're not disobeying a mandate, you're simply usurping your rights. But disobey limits, or disobey implies you broke a law, which a mandate is not. When I was a kid and I disobeyed, my dad would pull off his belt and apply supreme pain to my gluteus maximus. Now, that helped to straighten me out, but was I breaking a law when I disobeyed my dad? Maybe I was breaking a law of God, but was I breaking a law of man? No, I wasn't. So I don't buy the argument that disobey automatically implies that I broke a law. Have you ever disobeyed your boss at work? Was that breaking a law? Is there a law that says you're not allowed to disobey your boss at work? Maybe there's a rule in the human resource department, but no law. So I don't think I agree with that argument. But you can disobey a mandate. It simply means that you're not abiding by the mandate. You're not doing what the mandate says you're supposed to do. That's all it means. I think we're overthinking that. So the second one is Warrior 1700. You're absolutely correct about the Constitution, because I was saying, I swore an oath to the Constitution 8 times in my life, 4 for the military and 4 for law enforcement. He continues, he says, the problem is that we are not operating under the Constitution. We are being governed under the Uniform Commercial Code, which is basically maritime law. I've heard this argument before, and I've read the materials. I've gone through and done the research myself as well, and I would agree with that statement. Our country is a corporation. Yes, that occurred in I can't remember. I think it was 1871 is the year that actually took place, where Washington D.C. actually became a corporation, and we are being governed as such. And yes, I agree that our elected officials and the bureaucrats that run our government, the bureaucrats are those who work in these government agencies, are non-elected, but they work for the government in these agencies. They do operate not under the Constitution, but under a different law, and that's pretty clear. And the Uniform Commercial Code, the maritime law, I believe that's accurate, that that's what they're operating under. Now, we can see that they don't operate under the Constitution because they don't obey the Constitution. And they randomly break the Constitution, or they randomly disobey it, they randomly disregard it, and just do their own thing, it would seem. But they have a different code from the Constitution. He further says, we have been duped for a long time. Even our right to travel is being violated. Okay, now, this is not, he goes into, at this point, language which is common among sovereign citizens, this group called sovereign citizens. And so let me read to you what he says, and keep in mind that this is sovereign citizen language. We don't need a license to travel in our automobiles. We don't need insurance. We don't need a registration. Those laws are for commercial vehicles and drivers which drive for wages. Even the speed limit does not apply to travelers. Being an ex-law enforcement officer, you should look into it and realize how you've been fooled too. All right. There's so many things wrong with that part of the statement. And it's going to take a little bit of time to explain all this. First, let me talk about the implications and the consequences of what he's saying. He says, we don't need a license to travel in our automobiles. That's true, and that's not true. It's true if you're on private property. You don't need a license. It's true if you have permission to drive on someone else's private property, that you don't need a license. But if you're going to drive on a public road, which is paid for by taxpayer dollars, which means that all of the taxpayers of that city, that county, that state, they fund that road. They pay for that road. And they have just as much a right to that road as anyone else does. And they have just as much right to have rules for that road to be safe while traveling on that road as anyone else does. Then this idea that you don't need a license to travel on a public taxpayer funded road, you could eliminate license, and when soon as you do, you're going to have chaos on the roads, because you're going to have people on the roads that don't know how to drive. They've never been taught how to drive. They just, you could, if you don't have a license, you could have a 10-year-old. Some of these 10-year-olds, they get kind of big. So I've seen 10-year-olds almost as big as me that would get behind a car and start driving. You'd have drunks that would be driving. You'd have people under the influence of drugs that would be driving. You'd have people driving on the wrong side of the road routinely. You'd have people running through stop signs, through red lights, blowing through intersections without stopping and looking. And the number of deaths and traffic collisions and all of that would increase exponentially. And so the safety of your fellow travelers on the road would be in peril. And they have just as much rights as you do on the road. And so their right to travel with some sort of order to it, and cohesiveness to it, and safety to it, is just as high as your right to, quote, travel, end quote. All right, let's go on. We don't need insurance, he says. Well, if you don't have insurance, no problem. You hit my car, you total it, you put me into the hospital. Guess what my phone call is going to be to? A lawyer. Because I'm going to sue you. I'm going to take your house. I'm going to take your car. I'm going to take everything out of your bank account. and because you don't have insurance to cover my expenses. So I sue you and take whatever you have to cover my expenses from you hitting me. So that's the importance of insurance. That's why we have insurance, is to help litigate that. The insurance will pay out the payment to take care of my car and take care of me in the hospital and so forth. We don't need registration. A registration is really kind of a revenue collecting part of government. Well, you pay to get a registration, but there's other things a registration does for us. It tells us whose car it is, who belongs to the car. If somebody could come in and just take my car out of my garage and claim it's theirs. Oh no, this is my car. I bought this car. If there's no registration, there's no way of knowing that the car didn't belong to me. I come along and say, no, that car belongs to me. He says, no, the car belongs to me. Well, how are we supposed to resolve that dispute if there's no registration to say who the car actually belongs to? All right, so that's why registration is needed. Those laws are for commercial vehicles and drivers which drive for wages. That is not true. Each and every state of the 50 states has a vehicle code. And each vehicle code has the laws that state passes concerning vehicles and traveling on public roads, taxpayer roads, and so forth. And you have to look at each state's laws to determine the purpose of those laws, including rules of the road and all of that. So that's not true. It's not just for commercial vehicles. They get this stuff from documents that were drawn up prior to the Constitution. They were trying to come up with something to govern the new territories, the new world, if you will, as the colonies came into the United States. And they came up with some of these documents. And when the Constitution was written, it replaced all of those documents. None of those documents are in effect any longer. But they go back to those pre-Constitution documents to make these arguments, and it's not a legitimate argument. Even the speed limit does not apply to travelers. It does if you're on a public road. It does if you're on a taxpayer road, because your rights do not exceed the rights of your fellow travelers. And the purpose for speed limits is to take a 4,000-pound car, which is a weapon and can kill people, and put it within a reasonable amount of speed for the conditions of the road. You're not going to do 120 through a school zone on a back road that goes through a school zone while school is letting out. That's stupid. But if you didn't have those speed limits and enforcement of it, some people would do that because they're dumb. Okay? So you're talking taxpayer-funded property that belongs to all the taxpayers, then you can't usurp this kind of thing against your fellow travelers who are saying, no, you don't do 120 through the school zone while my child is, coming out of the elementary school and I'm trying to pick them up. You don't have a right to stomp all over the rights of that parent who's picking up their child. And that's the problem with this thinking, this argument. So, and he says being an ex-law enforcement officer, this, that, and other thing. So, yeah, I don't agree with that part of this particular comment. And I thought it was interesting because it brings up the sovereign citizen thing. And not everything they say is correct or accurate. Like I said, if it's a taxpayer road, then yes, driving on it is not a right, it's a privilege. You want to travel, you have the right to travel. If you want to use a public road to travel, you're going to have to obey the rules. It's that simple. And they are constitutional. Yes, they are constitutional. Now, if you want to buy private land that stretches across state lines and build your own private road that stretches across state lines and travel on it, you can do so without a license. You can do so at any speed you want to go. You can drive on either side of the road that you want to drive on. You can drive in any manner you want on that road. Nobody's restricting your right to travel. You want to don a backpack and start hiking across the country. Nobody's saying you can't do that. Nobody's restricting that. So don your backpack and start hiking. You want to hop on the back of a horse and start traveling across the plains? Then go for it. Nobody's regulating that. You want to jump on a bicycle or on a mountain bike and ride the back trails across different states? Nobody's restricting that. You have a right to travel. But if you get on a public taxpayer road, there are rules. Because we'll put it this way, you don't have the right to endanger other people in the manner in which you travel on that road. That's what you don't have a right to do. All right, so we settled that one. Now my phone gave me a low battery indication. So I think for this video, I'm gonna leave it there. But let me see, maybe I can, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. So I thought those were interesting comments. Maybe I'll do the other comments later in a different video. But I thought that it was important to cover that because I hear this stuff a lot. And I don't agree with those arguments. I think there's major flaws in those we have a right to do whatever we want without consequences arguments. I think they're foolish. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.